The search for the true self has captivated human beings for centuries. Yet Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, offers us a map to understanding it. According to Jung, we are more than the surface identities we project to the world. Beneath this outer layer lies a complex and profound inner world. This inner world is not something distant or abstract, but a dynamic force that shapes our thoughts, emotions, and actions in ways we often don't recognize. Individuation, the journey to psychological wholeness, is the key to unlocking the true self, a process of integrating the conscious with the unconscious, the light with the dark, and the known with the unknown. Jung's theories invite us to confront the parts of ourselves we've long ignored or suppressed, to embrace our inner contradictions, and ultimately to step into the fullness of who we truly are. This journey is not for the faint of heart, but it is the path to self-realization, emotional freedom, and a deeper connection to the world around us. It is through understanding archetypes, the shadow, dreams, and the self that we can begin to see the layers of our being, slowly revealing the essence of our authentic self. In a world that often values external validation over internal wisdom, Jung's vision offers a powerful and transformative guide to living a life that is deeply connected to our truest essence. Every human being at some point in life quietly asks the question, who am I really? Not the person we present to the world, not the roles we play, but the deeper, authentic version of ourselves that exists beneath all the noise. This is what Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, called the true self, the center of our individuality, the guiding presence within us that holds our deepest truths. In a world full of distractions, social expectations, and constant comparisons, discovering our true self has become more difficult than ever. But Jung believed that within each of us lies an inner path, waiting to be uncovered. This path isn't always comfortable. In fact, it often leads us into the darker corners of our own psyche. But Jung argued that only by facing these shadows can we find what is most real, most meaningful, and most ours. Jung's approach to psychology was spiritual, symbolic, and deeply human. He didn't just see the mind as a machine of thoughts or behavior. He saw it as a living ecosystem of memories, desires, fears, myths, and archetypes, timeless patterns that shape how we love, fear, dream, and grow. The journey to the true self, he said, begins when we start looking inward and questioning the versions of ourselves we've learned to become. From childhood, we're shaped by what others want us to be: parents, teachers, society. We wear masks, we play roles, we adjust our personalities to fit in, to be liked, to survive. These are necessary in some ways, but they are not our true identity. Jung called this outward face the persona, a mask created for the world, not for ourselves. Behind the persona, however, is something richer, deeper, and more mysterious. The true self isn't perfect. It holds both light and darkness. It contains our strengths and our wounds, our hopes and our fears. Jung believed that real growth begins not when we try to become someone else, but when we embrace the totality of who we already are. That means acknowledging not just our achievements and virtues, but also our flaws, insecurities, and unconscious impulses. This idea forms the heart of Jung's work. He didn't offer easy answers or quick solutions. Instead, he invited people into a lifelong process of self-discovery that he called individuation, a journey toward becoming whole. And wholeness, according to Jung, doesn't mean perfection. It means integration. It means bringing together all the parts of ourselves, conscious and unconscious, good and bad, known and unknown, into one coherent and honest identity. Jung saw dreams, symbols, myths, and even religion as tools that could help us navigate this inner journey. He believed that we are all influenced by a deeper collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of human experiences that show up in the stories we tell, the characters we imagine, and the longings we carry. Understanding this deeper layer helps us not only know ourselves better, but also feel more connected to others and to the human experience as a whole. But the search for the true self is not just a private, personal matter. It's also a moral and spiritual responsibility. When we live from our true self, we bring authenticity into the world. We act with integrity, not out of fear or the need for approval. We listen to our inner voice rather than follow the crowd. This creates a ripple effect. Our courage helps others find theirs. Our honesty invites others to be honest too. Jung's vision of the true self is radical in today's world, where image often matters more than essence, and where busyness can drown out reflection. But the need for this inner work is more urgent than ever. In a time when anxiety, emptiness, and identity confusion are widespread, Jung reminds us that meaning is not something we find outside of us. It is something we uncover within. To begin the journey to your true self, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need curiosity, patience, and a willingness to face yourself honestly. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And in this awakening, you begin to meet the person you were always meant to be. Not a copy of others, not a mask, but your most real, alive, and unique self. That is the journey we are about to take together. To understand Jung's idea of the true self, we first need to understand how he saw the human mind, or what he called the psyche. For Jung, the psyche wasn't just a collection of thoughts and emotions. It was an entire inner universe made up of conscious awareness, hidden memories, personal experiences, dreams, instincts, and powerful symbolic forces. It was both deeply individual and connected to something universal. Jung divided the psyche into three major parts: the conscious mind, the personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. Let's begin with the conscious mind. This is the part we are aware of, our everyday thoughts, decisions, and feelings. It includes our sense of self, which Jung called the ego. The ego helps us function in daily life, make choices, and build an identity. But Jung believed that the ego is only a small part of who we truly are. Beneath the surface of our awareness lies the personal unconscious. This contains forgotten memories, repressed emotions, and experiences we've had but no longer think about. It's like a storage room for everything we've seen, felt, and reacted to, especially the parts we've denied or avoided. For example, if you were taught as a child not to express anger, you might have pushed that emotion into your unconscious, but it's still there, influencing how you behave. Even deeper than the personal unconscious is what Jung called the collective unconscious. This is one of his most important and unique contributions to psychology. He believed that all humans share a kind of inherited mental framework, filled with timeless patterns and images called archetypes. These archetypes show up in myths, fairy tales, religious stories, and dreams across all cultures. They are not learned, they are born with us. Some of the main archetypes include the mother, the hero, the wise old man, the trickster, and the shadow. These characters appear again and again in stories because they represent something universal in human experience. But they don't just live in stories, they live inside us. Each archetype has a psychological meaning and a role in our development. They guide how we deal with life's challenges, how we relate to others, and how we understand ourselves. For Jung, the psyche wasn't static, it was always in motion. He believed that the psyche constantly seeks balance and growth. Just as the body tries to heal itself physically, the psyche tries to move toward wholeness. This is where the idea of the self comes in. The self, with a capital S, is the total expression of who we are. It includes the conscious ego, the unconscious mind, the archetypes, the shadow, and everything in between. It is our deepest center, the blueprint of our full potential. But reaching this self is not easy. It requires a long and honest inner journey, one that Jung called individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming who you really are, beyond roles, beyond expectations, and beyond the limited idea of yourself created by the ego. Through individuation, we begin to integrate all parts of the psyche, light and dark, known and unknown. The goal isn't to get rid of the unconscious, but to make it conscious. Only then can we live in alignment with our true nature. Jung also believed that our dreams were vital messages from the unconscious. He encouraged people to analyze their dreams, not just as random images, but as symbols filled with meaning. Each dream, he said, carries a message about what is missing or hidden in our waking life. By listening to these messages, we begin to understand ourselves more deeply and move closer to the self. What makes Jung's vision so powerful is that it connects psychology to something greater than the individual. He saw life not just as a series of events, but as a journey of the soul. His view of the psyche was spiritual, symbolic, and deeply human. He believed that each of us is born with a purpose, a path toward becoming whole. And the psyche, in all its complexity, is the map that helps guide us there. In the end, Jung's message is this: you are more than you think you are. Beneath your surface lies an untapped depth, rich with meaning, wisdom, and power. The psyche is not something to control or escape, but something to explore. And in that exploration, the truth of who you are begins to emerge. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the persona to explain how we present ourselves to the outside world. The word persona comes from Latin and originally referred to the masks worn by actors in ancient theater. In Jungian psychology, the persona is the social mask we wear in our everyday lives. It's the version of ourselves we show to others so we can fit in, be accepted, or play certain roles in society. From an early age, we begin to develop a persona based on what's expected of us. If you're praised for being polite, you may develop a nice persona. If you're rewarded for being successful, you may build a winner persona. These masks help us function in the world. They allow us to be employees, friends, parents, students, or leaders. In this way, the persona is not inherently bad. It's necessary to survive and interact with society. But the problem begins when we start to believe that the persona is our true self. Jung warned that if we become too identified with our persona, we lose touch with who we really are inside. We might seem confident, funny, or strong on the outside, but if it's only a performance, if it doesn't match our inner truth, we can start to feel empty, disconnected, or fake. Many people go through life polishing their persona, building their image, gaining approval, yet secretly feeling like something important is missing. That missing piece is often the authentic self that has been hidden beneath the mask. The danger of the persona is that it can become so polished, so well rehearsed, that it turns into a barrier between us and our own soul. We may start to censor our feelings, silence our needs, or betray our values just to maintain the image we've created. And over time, this disconnect can lead to anxiety, depression, burnout, or a deep sense of meaninglessness. That's because the true self, our real thoughts, emotions, dreams, and desires, has been pushed into the background. Jung didn't suggest we throw away the persona completely. Instead, he emphasized the importance of becoming aware of it. He encouraged people to ask, what mask am I wearing right now? Why do I feel the need to wear it? What parts of myself am I hiding to keep this mask in place? These questions help us loosen the grip of the persona and bring more honesty into our lives. For example, someone who has always played the role of the strong one may find it hard to admit vulnerability, but in trying to maintain that persona, they may never ask for help. even when they need it. Or someone who's seen as the funny one might use humor to avoid expressing sadness or pain. In both cases, the persona hides parts of the self that are essential for healing and authenticity. Jung saw the path to the true self as a process of integration. That means learning to balance the persona with what's real inside. Instead of letting the mask control us, we begin to choose when and how to use it, consciously, not automatically. We can still play roles in society, but we do it with awareness and with a deeper connection to our truth. The persona also affects our relationships. When two people are only interacting through their masks, there is no true intimacy. Real connection only happens when we let down the mask and show who we really are, our fears, hopes, flaws, and truths. It's risky, yes, but it's also the only way to feel seen, known, and loved for who we truly are. In today's world of social media, the persona can become even more powerful. Online, we often present a carefully curated version of ourselves, happy, successful, flawless. But this constant performance can leave us feeling hollow. Jung's teachings remind us that no photo, post, or status update can capture the full truth of a person. Only we can discover that truth by turning inward and facing ourselves honestly. So the persona is a useful tool, but it must remain a tool, not a trap. Jung's message is clear: don't confuse the mask with the soul. The more we understand the persona and its role in our lives, the closer we get to uncovering the real self that lives behind it, a self that doesn't need to perform, but simply is. One of Carl Jung's most powerful and challenging ideas is the concept of the shadow. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we reject, deny, or hide, qualities we don't want to admit we have. These can be emotions like anger, jealousy, selfishness, or weakness. They can also be positive traits we've pushed away, like sensitivity, creativity, or ambition, if those traits were discouraged when we were young. The shadow lives in the unconscious mind. It's not evil or dangerous by nature, it's simply the parts of ourselves we have disowned. But because we've buried these parts so deeply, they can influence our behavior without us realizing it. That's what makes the shadow so powerful. When ignored, it controls us from the dark. When faced, it becomes a source of truth and transformation. Jung believed that everyone has a shadow. It's formed during childhood, when we begin learning what is acceptable and what is not. For example, if a boy is told that crying makes him weak, he might repress his emotions and push sensitivity into his shadow. If a girl is told to always be polite and never assert herself, she might bury her anger or strength. Over time, these hidden traits don't disappear. They simply move underground, shaping how we think, feel, and act. When we ignore our shadow, we tend to project it onto others. That means we see in others the qualities we can't accept in ourselves. If you've denied your own selfishness, you might constantly accuse others of being selfish. If you've buried your anger, you may feel uncomfortable around people who express theirs freely. These reactions are clues that the shadow is at work. Jung emphasized that confronting the shadow is not about judging or blaming ourselves. It's about honesty. It's about looking in the mirror and saying, yes, I have these traits too. They are part of me. This takes courage, but it also opens the door to real self-awareness. Until we face our shadow, we remain incomplete. But once we begin to integrate it, we move closer to psychological wholeness. Meeting the shadow is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong process. We uncover it in our dreams, in our emotional triggers, in the way we react during stress, and in our judgments of others. Often, life forces us to face the shadow through crisis, when the mask of the persona cracks and raw emotions rise to the surface. These moments, though painful, are opportunities for deep healing and growth. Jung didn't see the shadow as something we should get rid of. In fact, he believed that some of our greatest power lies hidden within it. Qualities we once feared or rejected can become sources of strength. For example, someone who embraces their anger in a healthy way can learn to set strong boundaries. Someone who reconnects with their sadness may develop deep compassion for others. The shadow is also rich with creativity and intuition. Many artists, writers, and thinkers find their inspiration by diving into the darker parts of the psyche. Jung himself believed that the unconscious, where the shadow lives, is a wellspring of symbols, images, and archetypes that can guide us if we listen. By making friends with our shadow, we unlock energy that was once tied up in fear or repression. But it's important to approach this work with care. Shadow work is not about acting out our darker impulses or justifying harmful behavior. It's about understanding where those impulses come from and finding more conscious, balanced ways to express ourselves. It's about integration, not indulgence. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This means that true personal growth doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from facing our imperfections, accepting them, and choosing to grow from them. So when we ask, "Who am I really?" the shadow answers, "You are more than you think, more complex, more contradictory, and more whole." The path to authenticity runs straight through the parts of ourselves we've tried to forget. And in embracing those parts, we take a vital step toward the true self, stronger, wiser, and more real than we ever imagined. At the heart of Carl Jung's psychological theory is a process he called individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming the person you are truly meant to be. It's not about becoming perfect or fitting into society's image of success. Individuation is about becoming whole, about integrating every part of your psyche, your conscious self, your unconscious impulses, your shadow, your persona, your dreams, your wounds, and your potential into a unified, authentic self. This process begins with awareness. Most of us start life deeply attached to our persona, the role we play in society, and unaware of the deeper forces shaping our behavior. Over time, cracks may appear in the mask. We feel dissatisfied, disconnected, or lost. We start asking questions. Why do I feel empty even though everything looks fine? Why do I repeat the same patterns? Who am I really? These questions mark the beginning of individuation. Individuation is not a straight or easy path. It often involves crisis, conflict, or a sense of being stuck. But Jung believed these struggles are not signs of failure. They are signs that something inside us wants to grow. Like a snake shedding its skin, we must let go of outdated identities to make room for something deeper and more real. Painful as it can be, this process is necessary for psychological transformation. The key to individuation is integration. That means bringing unconscious parts of ourselves into consciousness, especially the ones we've ignored or suppressed. This includes our shadow, the parts we've denied, as well as forgotten dreams, hidden desires, and unexplored talents. Each time we face a new layer of ourselves honestly, we move one step closer to wholeness. For example, someone who has always been the responsible one might discover a playful or rebellious side they've buried. By allowing that side to exist, not in a destructive way, but in a balanced one, they become more complete. Another person who has lived in fear of conflict might learn to express anger constructively, reclaiming a lost part of their strength. These changes don't mean we become someone else, they mean we become more ourselves. Dreams play an important role in this process. Jung believed that dreams are messages from the unconscious, guiding us toward balance and growth. Symbols in dreams often represent aspects of the psyche that need attention. A wise figure might symbolize inner wisdom. A monster might represent a fear or emotion we haven't faced. By exploring these symbols, we uncover layers of meaning about who we are and what we need to heal. Another essential aspect of individuation is the emergence of the self. Not the ego, which is the center of consciousness, but the self, which is the center of the entire psyche. The self is the deeper intelligence that knows what we need to grow even when we don't. It calls us to become whole. We hear its voice in moments of intuition, in dreams, in crises, or in a quiet inner pull toward something meaningful. The more we listen to this voice, the more aligned we become with our inner truth. Jung often described individuation using images from myth and alchemy. He saw it as a heroic journey, much like those in ancient stories where the hero must leave the familiar world, face dragons, the shadow, discover hidden treasures, the unconscious, and return transformed. This metaphor reminds us that individuation is not just personal, it's archetypal. It's a journey every human soul is invited to take. But individuation is not isolation. Becoming whole doesn't mean withdrawing from others. It means engaging with life more authentically. As we integrate more of ourselves, our relationships deepen. We become less reactive, more compassionate, and more open to others' complexities because we've faced our own. We also become more creative because we're no longer blocking vital parts of ourselves. Jung emphasized that individuation is not about becoming special, it's about becoming real. In a world full of distractions and artificial images, individuation brings us back to our center. It helps us live from the inside out, not the outside in. It teaches us to trust our inner compass, even when it leads us away from the crowd. Ultimately, individuation is the soul's journey home. It is the path of healing, awakening, and becoming whole. And while the road may be long, each step brings us closer to the true self, the one that has been there all along, waiting to be remembered, welcomed, and lived. In Carl Jung's vision of psychological growth, the self is the ultimate goal of the human journey. It's not just another part of the psyche, it is the central force that holds all other parts together. The self represents the totality of who we are, both conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, known and unknown. It's the deepest, most authentic part of us, and Jung saw it as a guiding presence that moves us toward wholeness. While the ego is the center of our conscious identity, the I we think we are, the self is much greater. It includes the ego, but also goes far beyond it. The self contains every aspect of our being, our thoughts, emotions, instincts, dreams, fears, desires, and archetypal energies. It's like a vast inner landscape where all these elements live in dynamic relationship. The self is the organizing principle that gives shape and meaning to the psyche. Jung often described the self as the inner compass that quietly directs us toward balance and authenticity. It speaks to us through dreams, symbols, intuition, and moments of deep insight. Sometimes it appears as a wise figure in dreams, such as a sage, a guide, or a divine image. At other times, it reveals itself through synchronicities, those strange, meaningful coincidences that seem to point us in a certain direction. However it shows up, the self always carries the message, become who you truly are. But reaching the self doesn't happen automatically. It requires the process of individuation, the inner work of recognizing, confronting, and integrating the different parts of ourselves. As we move through this process, we begin to align more and more with the self. We become less driven by ego desires or external approval, and more guided by an inner truth. We stop trying to be someone we're not and start honoring who we really are. The self also brings inner harmony. Most people live with inner conflict, torn between what they feel and what they're supposed to feel, between who they are and who they pretend to be. The self doesn't erase these conflicts, but helps us integrate them. Instead of pushing one side away, we learn to hold opposites within us. For example, we might discover that we can be both strong and sensitive, logical and intuitive, grounded and imaginative. The self allows us to be complex and whole, not one-sided. Jung symbolized the self using images of unity and completion. One of his favorite symbols for the self was the mandala, a circular image often seen in art, religion, and nature. The mandala represents balance, symmetry, and the coming together of all parts into a harmonious whole. Jung found that people often drew mandalas during moments of deep psychological transformation, even without knowing what the symbol meant. It was as if the psyche itself was expressing its longing for unity. Importantly, the self is not an ideal or perfect state. It doesn't mean becoming flawless or reaching some final destination. Instead, it's about becoming real, grounded, and fully human. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is what the self represents, not a fantasy of perfection, but the truth of your own being, lived honestly and courageously. The self also connects us to something larger than ourselves. Jung believed that the self had a spiritual dimension. It is not just psychological, but also deeply sacred. It's the part of us that senses we are part of a greater whole, connected to nature, humanity, and the cosmos. Many people feel this connection during moments of awe, stillness, or deep reflection. In these moments, the boundary between the personal and the universal seems to dissolve, and we glimpse something timeless within us. In daily life, living from the self means making choices that are aligned with our inner truth. It means listening to our intuition, respecting our limits, honoring our values, and embracing our individuality. It also means facing our fears, acknowledging our wounds, and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. The self doesn't demand perfection. It calls for honesty and integrity. Ultimately, the self is not something we create. It is something we uncover. It has always been there, quietly waiting beneath the noise of the world and the demands of the ego. As we do the inner work of self-discovery, we begin to hear its voice more clearly. And in listening, we come home to ourselves, not a mask, not a role, but the deep, enduring truth of who we are. Carl Jung introduced a fascinating and profound idea when he spoke about archetypes, the universal patterns and images that exist in the collective unconscious of all human beings. Unlike memories or personal experiences, archetypes are not shaped by individual life stories. Instead, they are ancient, inherited blueprints of behavior and emotion that live deep within the human psyche. They are part of our psychological DNA, influencing how we think, feel, and relate to the world, often without us even realizing it. According to Jung, archetypes are the building blocks of the human mind. They appear in dreams, myths, stories, art, religion, and even daily life. Whether it's the hero setting out on a journey, the nurturing mother, the wise old man, the trickster, or the shadowy villain, these figures are not just characters in fiction. They are symbols of inner forces that live in every person. One of the most important things to understand about archetypes is that they are universal. You can find them in the sacred stories of every culture, across time and geography. The details may differ, but the core themes remain the same. Why do so many cultures have stories of a heroic quest or a battle between light and dark? It's because these stories reflect something true about our inner lives. The hero's journey is not just a tale. It mirrors our own journey toward growth, struggle, and self-discovery. Jung described the major archetypes that guide human development. For example, the mother archetype represents nurturing, care, and unconditional love. It might be projected onto our own mother or any figure who gives support and comfort, but it also lives within us. When we offer kindness to ourselves or others, we express the mother archetype from within. Then there's the hero archetype, which represents courage, strength, and the will to overcome obstacles. It's the part of us that pushes forward during hardship, that wants to prove its worth and protect what matters. We connect with the hero when we take a stand, face our fears, or rise from failure. The wise old man or woman archetype symbolizes inner wisdom, insight, and spiritual guidance. This figure often shows up in dreams or stories when we need to make an important decision. It might appear as a teacher, elder, or even a mysterious voice within. Jung believed that this archetype points us toward deeper truths and helps us connect with the self. Another vital archetype is the shadow, which we've explored earlier. It includes the traits we reject or hide from. The shadow often appears as an enemy, a monster, or something frightening in dreams or stories, but it holds valuable truth and energy when faced with honesty. There's also the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. Jung believed these archetypes help us balance the energies of both genders within ourselves. For example, a man connecting with his anima might develop greater sensitivity and emotional depth, while a woman accessing her animus might find more assertiveness and confidence. When these archetypes are integrated, we feel more balanced and whole. Archetypes aren't static or fixed. They develop and transform over time. For example, the child archetype may start as innocence and vulnerability, but grow into wonder and creativity. The trickster may seem mischievous or chaotic, but can bring about necessary change and challenge false order. By becoming aware of how these archetypes show up in our lives, we begin to understand ourselves on a deeper level. Jung emphasized that archetypes are not there to control us. They're there to guide us. When we become conscious of them, we gain freedom. We can choose how to relate to these inner forces rather than being blindly driven by them. This awareness is part of the individuation process. It's how we move from being shaped by unconscious patterns to living more consciously and authentically. Archetypes also connect us to something larger than ourselves. They remind us that our personal struggles are part of a shared human experience. When we dream of a journey, a battle, or a wise teacher, we're not alone. We're tapping into something ancient and timeless that every human being carries. In the end, understanding archetypes gives us a powerful language for understanding our inner world. They show us that we are not just isolated individuals, but part of a larger story, a story written not just in words, but in the deep rhythms of the psyche. And by becoming aware of these inner patterns, we take one more step toward the true self, fully awake, fully alive, and deeply connected. Carl Jung believed that dreams are not just random images or forgotten thoughts. Instead, he saw them as the direct voice of the unconscious, a natural and essential communication between the deeper parts of the psyche and the conscious mind. For Jung, dreams were meaningful, purposeful, and full of symbolic messages that could guide us toward healing, self-awareness, and ultimately, wholeness. Unlike Freud, who saw dreams primarily as expressions of repressed desires, Jung believed dreams go far beyond wish fulfillment. He viewed them as rich with symbolism, not literal meanings, but deeper truths encoded in metaphor and image. According to Jung, every dream is a message from the unconscious, designed to restore balance in the psyche, reveal hidden truths, or assist in the individuation process. One of Jung's core insights was that dreams often compensate for the imbalances in our conscious life. For example, if we see ourselves as overly logical and controlled during the day, we might dream of chaos, emotion, or nature, images that reflect the parts of ourselves we've suppressed. Dreams, in this way, help us reconnect with what we've ignored or denied, gently or sometimes dramatically, pulling us back into inner harmony. Dreams often contain archetypal symbols, images and patterns that connect us to the collective unconscious. A wise old man might appear in a dream as the wise archetype, offering guidance. A snake could symbolize transformation or hidden fears. A dark forest might represent entering the unknown within ourselves. These images aren't random, they carry deep psychological meaning. And even if a dream seems confusing or absurd at first, it often reveals surprising insights when explored thoughtfully. Jung encouraged dreamers not to look for quick, surface interpretations, but to approach dreams with curiosity and respect. He developed a method called amplification, where dream symbols are explored through myths, fairy tales, religion, and art to uncover deeper layers of meaning. For instance, dreaming of a lion might not just refer to something personal, but to the archetypal symbol of courage, strength, or spiritual royalty found in ancient stories across cultures. But interpreting dreams doesn't require expert knowledge. What's most important is developing a relationship with your dreams. Jung encouraged people to write them down, reflect on them, and observe recurring themes, symbols, and feelings. Over time, patterns emerge that show what the unconscious is trying to express. It's like learning a language. The more we listen, the more fluent we become in the voice of the soul. Importantly, dreams can also confront us with the shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. These dreams might be frightening or uncomfortable, but Jung believed they were among the most valuable. If we run from them, we miss an opportunity to grow. If we face them, we reclaim lost energy, understanding, and strength. A dream of falling, failing, or being chased may reflect inner fear, but it may also invite us to examine what we're avoiding in waking life. Jung also noted that dreams are deeply individual. The meaning of a symbol can vary greatly depending on the dreamer's life, feelings, and psychological stage. A snake might mean fear to one person and healing to another. That's why Jung emphasized that no one can interpret your dreams better than you, especially if you're honest and willing to explore your own inner world. Through dreams, we also meet the self, not in theory, but in direct experience. We may dream of a light, a temple, a circle, or a child, symbols that represent our core being and guide us toward deeper integration. These moments often feel deeply spiritual, even if the dream itself is simple. The self appears in dreams not to flatter us, but to lead us, showing where our energy is blocked and where it longs to flow. In this way, dreams become tools for transformation. They help us track the progress of individuation, notice where we are stuck, and receive guidance from the unconscious that can't be found in books or advice from others. Jung believed that everyone has an inner healer and teacher within the unconscious, and dreams are one of its main languages. In our fast, noisy modern world, it's easy to dismiss dreams as meaningless, but Jung invites us to see them as sacred messages from the soul. When we pay attention to them, not just analyze, but listen, we strengthen the bridge between our inner and outer worlds. We move closer to our authentic self, guided by symbols, stories, and the silent wisdom of the unconscious mind. The concept of the shadow is one of Carl Jung's most powerful and transformative ideas. In its simplest form, the shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we reject, deny, or hide away, because they are too painful, uncomfortable, or socially unacceptable. It includes our fears, weaknesses, repressed desires, and traits that we don't want to acknowledge. But while the shadow might seem like a dark and negative force, Jung believed that it is a crucial aspect of our psyche that, when integrated, can lead to deep personal growth and self-realization. The shadow is not inherently evil or destructive. Rather, it is the part of us that holds untapped energy, creativity, and potential. The more we suppress or avoid these parts of ourselves, the more they remain unconscious, leading us to act out in ways we don't fully understand. For example, someone who represses their anger might find themselves snapping unexpectedly, or someone who hides their need for approval might overcompensate by becoming excessively arrogant. The shadow's energy doesn't disappear. It remains in the background, influencing our behavior in ways that often feel out of our control. Jung described the shadow as being present not only on an individual level, but also collectively in societies. Social norms, taboos, and cultural rules dictate what is acceptable, and anything that falls outside these bounds becomes part of the collective shadow. This is why we often find ourselves projecting our shadow onto others, blaming them for qualities we deny in ourselves. For example, if we disown our vulnerability, we might see it as a weakness in others, criticizing them for the very trait we fear to acknowledge in ourselves. Confronting the shadow is a necessary step in the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness and integration. Instead of running from the shadow or denying it, Jung encouraged us to embrace it, to bring its hidden aspects into the light of consciousness. This is not an easy task. The shadow contains some of our deepest fears, shame, and unresolved emotional pain. But facing it, rather than avoiding it, is essential for growth. By bringing the shadow into awareness, we begin to integrate its energy into our lives in constructive ways. For example, someone who fears their own anger may learn to express it healthily, using it to set boundaries and protect themselves. Someone who has long repressed feelings of sadness may discover that acknowledging their grief allows them to heal and move forward with greater emotional maturity. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to integrate it, to acknowledge it, understand it, and transform its energy into something positive. One of the most common ways the shadow appears is through projection. When we project, we attribute our own undesirable qualities onto others. For instance, if we are unwilling to acknowledge our own greed, we may become hypersensitive to it in others, constantly judging them for it. Projection serves as a defense mechanism, allowing us to distance ourselves from uncomfortable feelings. But this also keeps us trapped in a cycle of misunderstanding and disconnection. When we learn to recognize projection, we gain the power to turn inward and face the parts of ourselves we've avoided. The integration of the shadow can also open us up to greater creativity and authenticity. Since the shadow holds much of our unconscious energy, bringing it into conscious awareness frees up that energy, which can be channeled into creative endeavors, relationships, and personal growth. It is not by rejecting or controlling our dark side that we become whole, but by accepting it and recognizing it as part of the whole self. This doesn't mean we embrace the shadow without discernment. Not all aspects of the shadow are healthy or constructive. Some behaviors, such as destructive aggression or unchecked narcissism, are harmful to ourselves and others. The goal is to confront the shadow with self-awareness, acknowledge its power, and make conscious choices about how we channel that energy. It's a delicate balance, accepting the parts of us we've rejected while also recognizing the need for boundaries and growth. Jung also emphasized that the shadow is universal. Every person, no matter how good or virtuous, has a shadow. It is an inherent part of the human condition, and as such, the process of facing the shadow is a lifelong journey, not a one-time task. At different points in our lives, we may discover new aspects of the shadow that we hadn't previously recognized. Each time we face these parts, we become more whole, more integrated, and more authentic. The journey into the shadow is also deeply liberating. As we confront and accept the darker parts of ourselves, we release the emotional burden of suppression and self-judgment. We begin to live with greater honesty, self-compassion, and acceptance. By no longer running from our fears and weaknesses, The concept of individuation is central to Carl Jung's entire body of work. For Jung, individuation is the lifelong process of becoming the fullest, most authentic version of oneself. It is the journey of integrating all parts of the psyche, the conscious, the unconscious, the light, the dark, into a unified whole. Individuation is not about becoming perfect or achieving a final state of being. It is about accepting and embracing the entirety of who we are, including all the contradictions, complexities, and paradoxes that make up our unique personality. At its core, individuation is about finding the self, the deeper, more authentic aspect of our psyche that transcends the ego. The ego represents our surface identity, the part of us that is shaped by social roles, expectations, and conscious desires. While the ego is important for functioning in the world, it is only a small part of who we are. The self, by contrast, is the totality of our being, conscious and unconscious, personal and universal, human and transcendent. Individuation is the process of integrating the ego with the self, aligning our outer life with our inner truth. Jung emphasized that individuation is a process of inner transformation that unfolds over time. It doesn't happen overnight, nor does it follow a linear path. Instead, it is a dynamic journey that takes us through different stages of growth, confrontation, and integration. Along the way, we encounter many challenges and obstacles. We may confront aspects of the shadow that we have long denied, face fears and insecurities, or struggle with feelings of confusion and doubt. These are natural parts of the individuation process. They are the ways in which the unconscious tries to bring us closer to wholeness by revealing what has been hidden. A key part of individuation is embracing the unconscious, the aspects of the psyche that we are often unaware of or refuse to acknowledge. This includes not only the shadow but also the archetypes, instincts, dreams, and emotions that live within us. The unconscious speaks to us in symbols, metaphors, and images, and we must learn to listen to its language. Through dreams, for example, we can uncover hidden desires, repressed emotions, and unresolved conflicts. By integrating these unconscious elements into our conscious awareness, we begin to align more closely with the self. Jung also saw the encounter with the other, especially the anima and animus, as a key part of individuation. The anima represents the inner feminine aspect of the psyche in men, while the animus represents the inner masculine aspect in women. These archetypes help us balance the energies of both genders within ourselves. For a man, integrating the anima means developing qualities like emotional depth, intuition, and receptivity, while for a woman, integrating the animus means accessing traits like assertiveness, logic, and inner strength. As we develop these qualities, we become more whole, less defined by rigid gender roles, and more in tune with the totality of the psyche. Individuation also involves integrating contradictions within ourselves. For example, we might struggle with being both strong and vulnerable, rational and emotional, independent and dependent. The ego tends to push us to choose one aspect over the other, to fit neatly into one box. But individuation teaches us that we don't have to choose. We can hold opposites within ourselves and embrace the complexities of our humanity. This is one of the key lessons Jung imparted. Wholeness does not mean perfection or uniformity. It means accepting all parts of ourselves, even the ones that seem contradictory or messy. Another important aspect of individuation is spiritual growth. Jung believed that the process of individuation inevitably leads us toward a deeper sense of meaning, connection, and purpose. As we align with the self, we become more aware of the sacred dimension of life, whether it's through personal spirituality, connection to nature, or a sense of unity with the universe. This spiritual aspect of individuation helps us move beyond the ego's limited perspective and tap into a greater, more transcendent understanding of existence. Individuation also invites us to create a new relationship with the world around us. As we grow more authentic and integrated, we begin to live in alignment with our deepest values and truths. This might mean making difficult decisions, such as changing careers, ending toxic relationships, or embracing new creative pursuits. The more we become who we truly are, the more we begin to live a life that is true to ourselves, not shaped by external pressures or expectations. Ultimately, individuation is a journey of liberation. It frees us from the constraints of the ego, the fears of the shadow, and the limiting beliefs of society. It allows us to step into the fullness of who we are, with all of our complexities, contradictions, and potentials.